Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. The show is composed of a number of different segments. First, we're going to take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance. And we're also going to take a closer look at what's happening in the world of technology and the latest cultural events, in addition to a closer look at the world of sports. We're going to take a short break, but first, after that, we're going to start off with the world of politics. The UN General Assembly has approved the re-election of Egypt as a member of the UN's 31-member State Peace-Building Commission, PBC, for the 2 years of 2023 to 2024. According to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The African group in New York endorsed Egypt's re-election, which is a testament to Egypt's extended contributions in supporting peace-building efforts in Africa, including during Egypt's presidency of the PBC in 2021. Egypt's permanent representative to the UN affirmed that Cairo would remain committed to ensuring efficiency in the PBC. He also highlighted the importance of providing sufficient and sustainable funding for peace-building activities. According to the UN's 2021 figures, Egypt is the 7th largest contributor of uniformed personnel to the UN peacekeeping, deploying nearly 3,100 military and police personnel. Established in 2005, the PBC is an intergovernmental advisory body that supports peace efforts in conflict-affected countries. Its member states are elected from the General Assembly, the Security Council, and the Economic and Social Council. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about it is Dr. Hassan Wagi, a professor of political science at Cairo University. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you.
Firstly, what is the significance of having Egypt re-elected as a member state in the Peace-Building Commission?
Yes, the significance is quite clear. When you have three bodies in the United Nations, like the General Assembly and the Security Council, and the Economic and Social Council nominate a country for membership. This is quite significant that this country is really playing a vital role in trying to contribute to peace building around the world, worldwide I mean. And also Egypt is one of the important founding members of the United Nations, so the significance is there.
Yes, according to the UN data as well, Egypt is the 7th largest contributor when it comes to the Peace-Building Commission. Why is this an important factor, and will Egypt continue to have a strong presence in the PBC?
Actually, Egypt has been playing a very important role in peace building, even when it comes to immediate borders of Egypt. Egypt is trying to establish peace on the western side in Libya. We have been with peace treaties with Israelis. We in the south, Egypt is dedicating a great deal of effort to rebuild Africa. And you know, when you have this Cairo International Center for conflict resolution,
yes,
peacekeeping and peace building, CCCPA, which is affiliated with our foreign ministry, I think this center is very important to play a role when it comes to strategic peace building and peacemaking.
Yes, which brings me to the next idea, where the re-election was actually endorsed by the African group in New York. What does this actually mean for the Egyptian relations when it comes to the rest of the African continent?
Yes, since Egypt assumed the presidency and President Fattah was the president of the African Union, a great deal of efforts when it comes to the foreign policy of Egypt. Is dedicated to strengthen ties and to end the conflicts that really spread in several African countries. And Egypt is not only keen about this kind of peacemaking, but Egypt is very keen about peace building.
Yes.
Peace building is much more strategic, means that you are trying to incorporate all elements, groups, ethnicity, religious factors, all factors that really could impact conflicts and return
Yes.
countries to conflict. We have to dissect them and try to address them. It is not only sending military people like from the army and from the police in Egypt. Egypt is seventh when it comes to
Yes.
its role, when it comes to good contribution, when it comes to interventions that really impact and achieve peace in these areas.
So, sir, would you say that the African continent in general is confident in the efforts exerted by Egypt when it comes to the peace building?
Yes, I think that the re-election itself
Yes.
is very good indication, and who helped much more the New York group, the African countries really helped a lot to
Yes.
nominate Egypt for re-election again.
Okay,
And this is due to the efforts
Yes.
of Egypt.
Yes. Dr. Hassan Wagi, a professor of political science at Cairo University, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. And we are going to move on with President Vladimir Putin on Monday hosting a summit of the post-Soviet Commonwealth of Independent States in St. Petersburg. Billed as informal, the gathering is an end-of-year meeting often hosted by Russia. The CIS was formed following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 and grouped all 15 former Soviet republics except the three Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which never joined. Georgia left the grouping in 2009 over its 2008 war with Russia, and Ukraine pulled out in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. However, the Belarusian president, who attended, Alexander Lukashenko, said today that Russia and Belarus had achieved progress that can take years for some countries. During talks at the informal two-day gathering of the leaders of the Commonwealth of Independent States in St. Petersburg. Last week, Lukashenko hosted Putin in Minsk, a rare foreign visit for the Russian president. The meeting in Minsk prompted speculation that Putin was seeking to cajole Belarus into joining Russia's military campaign in Ukraine, something Lukashenko has so far declined to do. Residents in China's major cities of capital Beijing and Shanghai said on Tuesday they welcomed the lifting of travel restrictions a day after authorities announced measures easing border curbs. In a major step towards easing border curbs cheered by Asian stock markets on Tuesday, China will stop requiring inbound travelers to go into quarantine from January 8th, the National Health Commission said late Monday. Data from the travel platform Ctrip showed that within half an hour of the news searches for popular cross-border destinations on had increased tenfold. Macau, Hong Kong, Japan, Thailand, South Korea were the most sought after, Ctrip said. Data from another platform showed that within 15 minutes of news, searches for international flights jumped sevenfold, with Thailand, Japan, and South Korea topping the list. And a look at China in the last 3 years after China reported its first official COVID-19 case worldwide, the country is still battling a record surge of infections. The first case was reported December 31st, 2019, and was linked to a Wuhan, Hunan seafood market. At the time, Wuhan became the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak after people began falling ill with a mysterious form of pneumonia. However, some early cases had no known connection to Hunan, implying that the SARS-CoV-2 was already circulating before it had reached the market. 3 years on, China's Xinjiang, a big industrial province near Shanghai, is battling around 1 million new daily COVID-19 infections, a number expected to double in the days ahead. The provincial government said on Sunday. Despite the rise in cases, China reported no COVID deaths on the mainland for the 5 days through Saturday. The Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention had updated this on Sunday. Citizens and experts have called for a more accurate data as infections surge after Beijing made sweeping changes to a zero-COVID policy that had put hundreds of millions of its citizens under relentless lockdowns and battered the world's second-largest economy. Nationwide, figures from China had been incomplete as the National Health Commission stopped reporting asymptomatic infections, making it harder to track cases. On Sunday, the Commission stopped reporting daily figures, with the China CDC then publishing it. China narrowed its definition for reporting COVID since then, and counting the deaths only those caused by COVID-caused pneumonia or respiratory failure, raising many eyebrows among World Health experts. The country's healthcare system has been under enormous strain, with staff being asked to work while sick, and even retired medical workers in rural communities being rehired to help grassroots efforts. And the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic in March 11, 2020. According to the World Health Organization, the worldwide COVID death toll stands at 6.6 million as of December 23, 2022. And moving on, we're going to take a short break and move on to the world of business and finance. And we're starting off with Wall Street, where the S&P 500 closed higher as investors assessed inflation data against rate hikes and recession fears, while energy shares jumped on higher oil prices. A Commerce Department report showed U.S. consumer spending barely rose in November, while inflation cooled further, but not enough to discourage the U.S. Federal Reserve from driving interest rates to higher levels next year. The Personal Consumption Expenditure, or PCE, price index, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, rose 0.1% last month after climbing 0.4% in October. A benchmark survey showed U.S. consumer expects price pressures to moderate notably in the next year, with the one-year inflation outlook dropping to the lowest in 18 months in December. Wall Street indices had sold off sharply on Thursday after revised data had indicated a resilient American economy, fueling worries that the Federal Reserve could keep hiking rates for longer and end up pushing the economy into recession. Investors have been jittery since last week as the Fed indicated that it remains stubbornly committed to achieving a 2% inflation goal and projected rate hikes of above 5% in 2023, a level not seen since 2007. The S&P 500 gaining 0.59%, while the Nasdaq gained 0.21% and the Dow Jones rose 0.53%. And in local news, the Central Bank of Egypt Monetary Policy Committee has hiked the key interest rates in scheduled meetings by 300 basis points. The interest rates reached 16.25%, 17.25%, 16.75% and 13.57% for the overnight deposit rate, the overnight lending rate, the rate for the main operations and the discount rate respectively. The UK is to face more strikes throughout the festive season and into next year. British journalists said that it would be an issue for thousands of ambulance workers in England, and Wales walked out over pay on December 21st, increasing the strain on a state-funded health service a day after nurses went on strike, as government ministers advised the public to avoid taking risks. The story.
The UK government said the deeply regrettable strike would result in fewer ambulances on the road, with only the most urgent life-threatening cases, such as heart attacks, prioritized. Health and Social Care Secretary Steve Barclay said the public should just use their common sense, adding that the action came when the National Health Service was already facing very significant pressure from cases of fluid and COVID-19. Christina McAnee, General Secretary of the Union, said she was shocked by Barclay's comments, given that detailed contingency plans have been agreed in local areas. She said health workers, including ambulance crews, were leaving in droves because services had been run down, adding that health authorities were struggling to recruit and retain workers. The third union, the GMB, has said pay in the health service has fallen 17% in real terms since 2010, while demand for ambulances has risen 77% in the same period. An independent pay review body was awarded more than 1 million NHS workers a pay rise of at least £1,400, equating to an increase of at least 14% for most ambulance staff, according to the government. Unions have asked for a rise above inflation, which stood at 10.7% on the consumer price measures in November. Barclay said he was forced on clearing backlogs from the pandemic and reducing delays in admitting patients arriving at the hospitals in ambulances. He said the government had accepted the pay review body's recommendations, which had taken effect nearly 9 months ago. The NHS Confederation, which represents NHS organizations, said the strike risked patient safety. The army was put on standby to help drive and direct emergency vehicles, but soldiers will not have all the powers that ambulance staff have to respond or provide clinical care. More strikes are on the horizon in the United Kingdom, as rail workers, postal workers, nurses and other union members are planning new industrial action throughout the year-end holidays and into 2023. The country has faced massive strikes over the past weeks by transport and postal workers, nurses and border guards, among others. According to UK journalists, the government, which has criticized the striking workers for unfavorable pay demands, while being criticized itself for not negotiating directly with workers, hopes that public sentiment would turn against the striking workers, although that looks unlikely, with polls showing solid public support for the strikes.
Joining us over the phone to tell us more about the UK strikes and the economic situation there is Dr. Mahmoud Ayoub, the former plenipotentiary minister. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you and to the viewers.
Can you tell us, why are the worker unions across the UK striking and planning to continue to strike well into the new year?
When we find that almost 1.5 billion working days are lost in December alone, Most of the disputes are dragging for months now. It is considered the highest number of strikes since, let us say, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So they chose a critical time for strikes. Who is in strikes? Rail workers, nurses, ambulance drivers, postal delivery staff, bus drivers, civil servants. They are all protecting for higher pay to compensate the cost of living, the inflation and the cost of living rise. So it is critical for the British economy, especially when it is facing the aftermath of Brexit and the war in Ukraine and the change of governance because of wrong economic policies. So Britain is really facing critical times which will affect its standing on the world economy. So it is critical for the British government with this new Prime Minister who has been to COP27, and we hope that they will recover, but it seems that it's a bit difficult for them to tackle all these strikes which are happening at the same time and at critical time in December, in Christmas time, and the New Year time. So the strikers chose really sensitive timing for asking for pay rise.
Which sir brings me to the next idea here, where do you believe that the UK government can keep inflation under control into 2023, or is this a difficult task to maintain, given a lot of factors that you were talking about when it comes to the reason for inflation in the UK?
The government and the trade unions have to come to a compromise so that they can deflate this crisis. It is a big crisis which the British government is facing, and it has to sit down with the trade unions to find a compromise. Compromise does not mean that all the demands will be answered, but at least part of it, or a good part of it. So it is like a rope which two sides are pulling, and they must reach a compromise, and the sooner the better. Otherwise, the British economy is facing. We know that the inflation rate is about 10.7 for the last year, and so otherwise the inflation rate will be higher, and the deficit will be higher, and the repercussions will be detrimental to the standing of London as also as a financial center in the world.
Which brings me also to the idea of what the unions themselves are actually asking in the UK. That they're basically asking for something within the range of a 17% pay increase, which the UK government has said they would not be able to meet. Would you say that this is a fair ask from the unions? Their claim is that it is related to the inflation in the UK itself, that they don't want an increase whereby they're better off, but they just want to live at the same standard that they actually had before the inflation.
So the government is in a critical situation. It has to surrender some of its assets, or let us say principles, or basic ideas which it presented when the new Prime Minister was in charge. And so they have to surrender a part of it, otherwise situation will get worse for the new Prime Minister, for the British economy, and also for the British standing in Western Europe, especially when we find that there is inflation, in the world inflation, and Britain is a part of this world, and we are facing the aftermath of inflation, and they should be wise enough, I think, to compromise with the trade unions. Otherwise, they will lose more than what they have already lost financially and economically.
Yes, the UK government itself has been under a lot of pressure and has been battered, basically, or the economy itself has been battered because of a lot of different factors, including the Brexit. What else do you think led up to where the UK economy is right now?
The British economy is facing conflict, is facing disputes, is facing the downward trend, which is very important, very dangerous for in the short term and the medium term.
Yes.
And so the British economy is facing difficulties, which I think they will not be able to surmount within the limited time open to the government, because the unions are, the strikes are spreading, not only these 7 segments which I mentioned, but more will step in for strikes to ask the government to surrender more wages to compensate for the inflation, which is almost about 10.7 or 11% now. And so the situation is not good for the British economy or the British government, and they have to take drastic steps to compensate the workers or working force in Britain for this lower real income for the British workers.
Yes, we're also kind of seeing a butterfly effect, I suppose, whereby other European countries, we've seen unions also plan strikes in other European countries as well because of inflation and asking for pay rises. Do you believe that this is going to be a trend in the rest of Europe as well, and can the situation be dealt with in the European Union?
We will say it is a trend. There's a trend in Western Europe. It's the aftermath of the Ukraine war, and also what is happening after the COVID. And so most of the European countries, when I say I mean Western European countries, are facing the same dilemma, and the Germany and France are facing the same problem now. But in the case of Britain, it is a bit drastic because the strikes are widespread, and the government did not handle it from the beginning, from day one.
Yes.
They left it increase, and now they are surrounded with strikes everywhere. But when it comes to Germany or France, they are trying to find a compromise. The sooner the better for them.
Yes.
But this is not the case for British economy. They did not take these steps at an early stage, and so that's why they are facing the bad effects or the deflationary effect of these strikes on the economy as a whole.
Do you think that the UK government will actually start to deal with these strikes, especially now that we're starting to see critical areas of the government facilities be on strike, like nurses going on strike? This is a major issue. Ambulance drivers going on strike. People who basically save lives.
When we find that the majority of the workforce is going to strike, this means that there is something wrong in the running of the economy. The new government has been almost less than 2 months now, and this is the biggest strike since the time of 10 years ago, since the 80s or the 90s or the early this century, and at the time of Margaret Thatcher. And the government must surrender a part of its principles, will I say, to come to compromise with the trade unions. Otherwise, the government itself will lose its post.
Yes, and do you believe that since the previous government also didn't last very long, do you believe that there is still some sort of turmoil within the government itself about having their, feet planted down on the ground, or are they still suffering from the aftermath of the previous governments?
It is one of the effects of the aftermath of the previous government, which was collapsed. Did not stay in power almost less than 2 months or 1 month like that. So the previous government created the situation in which the country is facing now, raising the taxes and lowering the taxes at the time of increasing expenditure. It cannot go like this from the economic point of view. Lowering the taxes and increasing expenditure, where will there should be a balance between the two factors. So the present government is also, as you rightly mentioned now, facing the bad effects or tumors of what has happened with the previous government, and they did not tackle it as early as possible. And that's why it is dragging, and this is the situation in which British government is facing now. And if they did not take drastic steps to compensate the labor force in some way or other, I did not say fully compensate, but rather the word compensate is an elastic word. This depends on negotiations with the trade unions, who also are keen to find a compromise which is at least the rate of inflation, which is 10.7, should be the rate of rise in wages and salaries. So it is a critical situation for British government. We hope that it can pass it successfully. Otherwise, it will collapse like the other government, the previous government.
Okay, Dr. Mahmoud Ayoub, a former plenipotentiary minister, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and continue on with the rest of the episode. Moving on, Sam Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bond package while he awaits trial on a fraud charge related to the collapse of the FTX crypto exchange. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan have accused him of stealing billions of dollars in FTX customer funds to plug losses at his hedge fund, Alameda Research. Bankman-Fried was not asked to enter a plea on Thursday. He had previously acknowledged risk management failures at FTX, but has said he does not believe he has criminal liability. His defense lawyer, Mark Cohen, declined to comment after the hearing in the Manhattan federal court. Bankman-Fried's next court date is set for January 3rd, 2023, before the U.S. District Judge Ronnie Abrams, who will handle the case. Bankman-Fried founded FTX in 2019. A boom in the values of Bitcoin and other digital assets propelled the exchange to a valuation of some $32 billion earlier this year, making the Massachusetts Institute for Technology graduate a billionaire several times over, as well as an influential donor to U.S. political campaigns. But concerns about commingling of funds between FTX and Alameda led to a flurry of customer withdrawals in November, ultimately forcing the exchange to declare bankruptcy on November 11th. Bankman-Fried later said at a New York Times conference that he had just $100,000 in his bank account. Moving on to the world of tech and science, at a recent fashion show held in Hong Kong, attendees could not help but notice something alien about the new designs worn by models on the narrow catwalks. Here's the story.
At a recent fashion show held in Hong Kong, attendees could not help but notice something alien about the new designs worn by models on the narrow catwalk. Masked in monochrome blue, with summoned-down jackets tied to translucent skirts, fashion models of the Fashion XAL collection strutted past through, crammed with wood critics and fashion designers. Attendee Synethia Tessi said it felt like she was witnessing the future of fashion. Over 80 outfits designed by 14 different fashion designers from Fashion XAL were all done in part with the assistance of artificial intelligence software, ADA, short for the Based Interactive Design Assistant. The software was developed by PhD students and academics at the Hong Kong-based AD Lab. According to AD Lab CEO Calvin Wong, the software was not created to replace fashion designers, but to serve as a supporting tool. As Wong explained, the AD system itself is supported by all technologies such as image recognition, detection, and image generation. Designers can upload draft designs, sketches, materials in color palettes to a virtual mood board in AD system, and the software's algorithm generates blueprints from which designers can tweak and add their own unique flair. The advanced system can produce a dozen fashion design templates within 10 seconds, saving designers precious time usually spent on experimenting with colors, templates, fabrics, and combinations, Wong claims. Hong Kong-based fashion designer Mountain Yam has been using the AD platform for the past 6 months and said the system has not only saved him plenty of time but also inspired him artistically. He described his collaboration with AD as a romantic relationship. Despite the initial warm reception at the Fashion XO show, not everyone was impressed with the new collection. Fashion designer Julia Tilili said she felt a little sad to see that all the designers were used too subtly and to the front line of the collection, as they were not near as radical as the futurist collections she had helped design when she started her career. Idea, the world's first designer-led AL system for fashion, was artificially launched with the Fashion XAL show on December 19th and is currently available to designers in Europe and Asia Pacific.
A Ukrainian soldier wounded in the war earlier this year is heading back to his home country after his injuries led him to spend months in Mexico. Ole, who declined to share his last name and some details about his life, is one of close to a dozen soldiers who are receiving a bionic prosthesis in Mexico through a partnership with the Ukrainian embassy. He said he first joined the Ukrainian force as a volunteer in 2014 and he took up arms again at the beginning of the year as Russian soldiers began to creep into his country. Several months into the fighting, he was gravely wounded by Russian forces, losing his right arm along with sustaining an injury to his right eye. He was hospitalized and in a coma in Ukraine before being flown to Mexico. Ole has spent the past 3 months in the country working with Human Assistive Technologies, a medical technology manufacturer founded by Colombian Alvaro Reyes, in physical therapy, preparing to receive a prosthetic arm tailored just for him. And in the world of the arts and culture, the wildlife photographers and nature lovers enjoy observing dozens of local and migratory birds at Egypt's canal city of Port Said. The activities are part of the city's first international festival for bird watching and photography, held by Egypt's Tourism and Environment Ministries to support the environmental tourism sector in the country. At Ashtoum El Gamil Natural Reserve, nearly 200 wildlife enthusiasts and photographers participated in the festival. This is according to a statement by the Ministry of Environment. Egypt is considered an important spot for migratory birds, with nearly 200 local and migratory species registered at Ashtoum El Gamil Natural Reserve only, according to the ministry. Egypt hosts a total of nearly 470 local migratory bird species, according to environmental activist and wildlife photographer Water al-Bahri. Egypt's northern lakes and the Nile represent nearly 25% of the wetlands frequented by migratory birds in North Africa. Warmer temperatures in Europe due to climate change have impacted the ecological balance of migratory species in the MENA region. Climate change impacts birds' breeding grounds and hence their trips between Europe and the Middle East and Africa. Scientists say an estimated 500 million birds migrate from Africa to Europe and Asia every year. Some weigh just 99 grams. And squirrels, monkeys and pandas received colorful treats for Christmas at the Beauval Zoo in France as zookeepers gave them wrapped presents and Christmas tree-shaped bamboo sculptures. The monkeys unwrapped the presents containing hard-boiled eggs, apples and pear compote, as well as curry and hay. Pandas, on the other hand, were given apples and honey. The treats are part of the zoo's enrichment program designed to stimulate captive animals' cognitive abilities by sparking curiosity and creating variability in their daily routines. This ordinary residential street in Manila has been transformed into a Christmas wonderland, attracting hundreds of daily visitors with its dazzling and colorful lights, festive decorations, and a continuous artificial snowfall. The transformation was spearheaded by Filipino entrepreneur Irene Tan, with decorations such as dozens of life-size Christmas figurines, thousands of intricately arranged Christmas lights, and more than 50 sacks of rock salt covering the pavement to create the wintry look in the neighborhood of Paco. During the pandemic, the 55-year-old entrepreneur lost both her husband and mother, but said seeing the smiles on people's faces has helped her cope with the loss. Tan says she will continue for as long as she is able and will eventually pass on the merry tradition to her daughter, who has been helping her decorate her house yearly. Moving on to the final segment of sports, where Lionel Messi will return to Paris Saint-Germain at the beginning of January. The Ligue 1 club's manager Christophe Galtier said on Tuesday. The Argentine forward, seven-time Ballon d'Or winner, scored 2 goals to lead his country to victory over France on penalties in the World Cup final 9 days ago. The 35-year-old Messi will miss PSG's home league game against Strasbourg on Wednesday and the trip to Lens on Sunday. PSG are top of the standings on 41 points, after 15 games, 5 above second place Lens. And in Saturn news, Brazilian football legend Pelé's family members gathered at the Albert Einstein Hospital in Sao Paulo on Saturday, where the 82-year-old, widely considered one of the greatest footballers of all time, has been since late November. Doctors said this week that Pelé's cancer had advanced and that he requires care related to renal and cardiac dysfunction. His family said he would remain at the Sao Paulo hospital over Christmas. Pelé has received regular medical treatment since a tumor was removed from his colon in September last year. Pelé's son, Edino, who played in goal for Santos in the 90s, posted a picture of himself holding his father's hands to Instagram on Saturday with the caption, "Father, my strength is yours." We're going to end the show with something more upbeat, where one day before Germans traditionally celebrate Christmas, some 44,000 football fans gathered at the Cologne Sports Stadium on Friday night to sing carols during an event known as Let's Sing Christmas Carols. The event, which premiered in 2015, is seen as an emotional highlight for the fans of one FC Cologne and their families, according to the club, which is currently placed 13th out of 18 in the Bundesliga table. Cologne's Let's Sing Carols were cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID restrictions. Well, this brings us to the end of this episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.